Hello, everyone. Welcome to the first day of class. I hope you are all doing well and that you are staying safe amidst all the political stuff that's going on. Uh, as I as I've said in some previous videos, this is Introduction to Ethics, and my name is Gunnar Futh. I'm going to be your instructor for this course. What I normally like to do for classes that I teach in person is I like to play a song before each class begins to just kind of get us in the mood to do philosophy and to play something that is related to the reading more specifically to give students a brief chance to kind of reflect on the reading again and what they thought the reading meant. So if you haven't done so already, before watching this lecture, go ahead and click on the lecture notes for this lecture and play the song that you can find linked at the top of the lecture notes page. So for today's reading, this is the first day of class. I assigned for you the first half of Carl Gustav Jung's essay, Approaching the Unconscious, from his book, Man and His Symbols. Uh, I'll give you some brief information about the philosopher in question, and then I'll start talking about the reading more specifically, as well as I think what the main ideas of the reading were and what I want you to burn into your minds moving forward into this class. So, Carl Gustav Jung was born in 1875 and died in 1961. He was very active during the earliest 20th century. He was a Swiss psychiatrist, psychoanalyst, and philosopher. And along with Sigmund Freud, whom I'm sure you have heard of, he founded analytical psychology, that is, psychoanalysis, and was really one of the pioneers of psychoanalysis, which was trying to understand exactly what the human mind was like, and it was looking more specifically at the unconscious mind. What exactly is the human mind like? That is, what parts of it that we aren't consciously aware of, what are those parts like and how do they influence us? This was something that Jung was highly interested in and something that he devoted his life to studying and trying to understand. Some of his famous ideas are archetypal phenomena, which we're going to be talking about today. And he was also the psychologist who came up with describing people in terms of the introverted, extroverted personality characteristics. Just a little tidbit for y'all. So, like I said, today we're looking at the first half of Jung's essay, Approaching the Unconscious. And let me just give you a little bit of background on this reading and kind of what Jung is doing in it. So, we're entering our first unit in this class, which I've titled Preparing for Ethics, because I think in order to understand what it means to live an ethical life, and in order to treat ourselves as well as other people, animals, and the environment ethically, we need to understand what it means to be human. That is, what makes humans tick, how do they see the world, what influences how they see and act in the world. So that's kind of what we're going to be investigating today. In this unit, and more specifically in this reading, we're going to talk about what humans are like, how they see the world, and what makes humans up, and how we can understand the human mind. In this reading, Jung talks a lot about the unconscious mind, dreams, and the role that dreams play in human life. The first thing that Jung notes is that humans are creatures that create and use symbols, which are basically pictures or words for ideas and concepts that cannot be fully understood or comprehended, or that mean something more than they immediately convey. You're all familiar with what symbols are. You use symbols every day, pretty much. But what sets apart mankind from other animals and other beings on Earth is that we create and use symbols, and it plays a very important role in how we see and how we interpret the world. One of the things that Jung is going to emphasize in this reading is that humans have a mind that has both conscious elements and unconscious elements. So, what the conscious mind is the part of the mind that is involved with conscious awareness, all of the things that you're immediately aware of and can kind of direct your attention to in your waking life. So, The fact that I see this little book right here and I can feel it and touch it and I'm aware of what it feels like and what it looks like, all of that is part of my conscious mind. Similarly, if I feel like a feeling of anger and I recognize that and I can see that, that's part of my conscious waking life as well. But the human mind is not just made up of conscious contents and things that we are consciously aware of. There's also an unconscious aspect to our mind. And that's the part of the mind that is directly inaccessible to conscious awareness. The stuff that's going in the background that I can't really look at it and examine it, but it's the stuff that's kind of going on under the surface that, as we are going to see, has a direct impact on how I see the world and how I interpret the world around me. One of the things that Jung is going to be talking about here, and this plays a lot into some of the key concepts that we're going to be talking about later in this lecture, is that throughout the course of human history, and more specifically in modern society, contemporary society, our unconscious and conscious minds are not very integrated that well. We pay attention to what our conscious mind tells us, but a lot of what's going on in our unconscious mind, we don't really care about, we don't try to really understand it, and we kind of push it away and repress it. Jung thinks this is highly problematic because in order to live a fulfilling life and truly understand what one's desires are and how one understands the world, he thinks that we need to integrate both our conscious and our unconscious minds. Now would be a good time, I think, to bring up two of the concepts that are going to be related to this idea of the integration of the conscious and unconscious aspects of our minds, and that is Jung's concepts of the complex and the shadow. So all of the kinds of images and experiences and traumatic events that happen to us in our lives that we repress and kind of turn away from and don't really want to deal with, those can often form what Jung calls a complex, which kind of is a little thing in our minds that is influenced directly by these repressed desires and experiences that influence how we see and behave in the world. Uh, if you look at people who have mental health problems, they often have these complexes, which I'm talking about. For example, somebody who is abused as a child and blocks out those memories and doesn't deal with them and doesn't confront and try to get over that trauma, those kinds of repressed experiences can form a complex that later impacts how they see and view the world. For example, if a child is abused when they are younger, the kinds of experiences that they've had as instances of abuse may manifest in a tendency to shrink or flinch when somebody raises their hand or something like that. That would be an example of a complex. What Jung calls the shadow is basically the repressed and oftentimes unknown aspects of one's personality. And again, these can be traumatic experiences, repressed thoughts and feelings, things like that. All of the complexes that we have and all of the parts of ourselves that we don't really want to look at or confront, those make up what Jung calls our shadow. And each person has their own shadow that is basically the set of their repressed experiences and ideas and parts of themselves that they don't really want to work with. Jung's whole thing is basically going to be, in order to understand ourselves and lead a fulfilling life, we need to confront our own shadow, and we need to try to integrate our shadow with our conscious awareness and how we see ourselves consciously. A lot of this is going to have to do with the kind of symbols that we use in daily life and what we understand those symbols to mean. You've heard it said that our dreams don't really matter. They're just kind of random amalgamations of experiences that we have throughout the day. Jung and Freud are going to disagree with this flat out. One of the main ideas of this reading is talking about the role of dreams in people's lives and the function that dreams have, and basically what dreams are made of. What Jung discovered through his psychoanalytic practice is that the contents of our dreams, what we do dream about, it's not random. We know for a fact that dreams are caused by the brain. We don't really know exactly uh, each and every part of the brain that influences the dreams that we have. But what Jung discovered was our dreams are not just random amalgamations of experiences that we've had throughout the day. Oftentimes, what dreams are actually doing is they're expressing to us the contents of our unconscious mind. So, those repressed desires or repressed experiences that we don't really want to look at or contend with. What Jung stipulates in this reading is that the function of dreams is to basically clue us into what's wrong with us psychologically so that we can reestablish psychic equilibrium. He thinks that everybody is working at their best and operating at their best when there's a balance of psychic forces in the mind, and we're not too angry, we're not too sad, we don't have a really strong desire that we can't fulfill or something like that. When we are psychologically stable and all the processes are working as they're supposed to, that is what psychic equilibrium looks like. And often what dreams do is they clue us into where the problem areas are in trying to establish that psychic equilibrium. So rather than being just kind of random, arbitrary things that happen to us, dreams actually play a very important role in how we should understand what's going on in our unconscious mind and the areas of life that we should actually be looking at in order to become more fulfilled and happy human beings. I've kind of talked a little bit about what the unconscious mind is at the beginning of the lecture, but now I kind of want to turn to what Jung has to say about the unconscious mind in the first half of this essay. More specifically, that isn't directly related to the stuff that he talks about with dreams. What's interesting about the unconscious mind, according to Jung, is that it is actually made up of two parts, contrary to popular belief. Not only does our unconscious mind and its inner workings have a direct impact on how we see, understand, and act within the world around us, but Jung hypothesized that each person's unconscious mind can basically be split up into what's called our personal unconscious and our collective unconscious. So our personal unconscious mind is basically the unconscious mind that you have that has been formed by your own personal experiences in life and your own personal beliefs and stuff like that. Your personal unconscious mind is that part of your unconscious mind that has been formed uh, throughout your life here on Earth. But Jung doesn't think that that's the only thing that makes up our unconscious mind. He also thinks that each one of us have what's called a collective unconscious. What the collective unconscious is, according to Jung, is uh, basically the stuff that has been passed down to us from our ancestors that we've inherited genetically that also makes up a part of our unconscious mind. So what Jung thinks is that not only do we all have a part of our unconscious mind that we form ourselves involuntarily just through living on Earth, but we also inherit a part of our unconscious mind from our ancestors that are based heavily on our ancestors' way of life, the thoughts and emotions that they had while they were living on Earth before us, as well as the stories and mythologies that they shared. So, what Jung is getting at in this essay is not only are we influenced by our own life, but we are also influenced genetically by the lives of our ancestors and their experiences and how they interacted with the world as well. So basically, our unconscious mind is and has been influenced by both our own experiences as well as the experiences of our ancestors. And we're finding out that this is actually supported by contemporary science, known as the field of epigenetics. You can look this up in your own time if you want. What was thought of as impossible in the past is actually turning out to be true. What we know now is that the experiences that people have during their waking life can actually have an impact on how our DNA is expressed, and more specifically, uh, the DNA that we pass on to our offspring. So we're actually learning that Jung is actually right here. Not only do we need to be careful about the way that we understand and act within the world that has an impact on our own unconscious mind, but in order to understand ourselves and in order to move and act properly within the world, we need to have an understanding of our ancestors' cultural history and how they understood and they lived. So let me just kind of break down some of the key concepts that Jung is looking at and using in this piece, and to kind of tie it all together for this first reading. So again, Jung hypothesizes that not only do we have a conscious part of our mind, but we have an unconscious part of our mind, and our unconscious mind can be split up into our personal unconscious and our collective unconscious. Our collective unconscious is the aspects of our unconscious mind that was experienced by people, notably our ancestors, and how that shows up, how the collective unconscious shows up, is it manifests itself in dispositions to experience certain images and thoughts. And I'll talk more about that as I get into the next two concepts, which are Jung's concepts of the archetype and archetypal images. Everybody knows that if we trace our ancestral lineage back, we all basically come from the same family line. What Jung discovered when he was looking at the mythologies of ancient peoples and religions and cultures and way of life is that he saw that there were universal symbols and images that kept popping up from cultures all around the globe. What Jung thinks is going on nowadays is the way that our ancestors used to live and interpret the world has a direct influence on how we understand and interpret the world as well. The elements of our collective unconscious show up as archetypes. And archetypes for Jung are universal predispositions to experience certain mental images or themes. Examples of archetypal images are things like light represents goodness and hope, uh, darkness represents despair or evil, the wilderness represents danger, the hero represents someone who goes out and overcomes an obstacle or an opponent and grows on account of that experience. These are all archetypal images and themes that we see basically in all cultures that have ever existed. And we see them also in the way we live today, though who we take as our heroes and our lights and our darknesses vary from culture to culture, obviously. So our collective unconscious basically uh, gives us dispositions to experience these certain images and themes. However, we're not really in tune a lot of times with what our unconscious mind is doing and the kinds of contents that are within our unconscious mind, namely the kinds of images and themes that we're predisposed to experience on account of our ancestors' way of lives. What can happen if we kind of repress our own experiences and desires and these images and themes and don't really care to look at them is we can develop complexes, which again are the unorganized and repressed set of images and experiences that may have an influence on our conscious and unconscious behavior. The set of all of our complexes and repressed and oftentimes unknown aspects of our own personality is what Jung calls the shadow. And these are made up of, like I said before, traumatic experiences, repressed thoughts and feelings, and things like that. What Jung thinks that we're basically trying to do on Earth as humans is we're trying to lead a life of personal fulfillment. That is, we are trying to individuate ourselves from others by leading our own lives and accomplishing our own goals and meeting our own desires. How he thinks that we're going to do this best is by integrating our conscious and unconscious minds so that they're no longer in conflict with one another. That is, our unconscious mind isn't steering us this way, where our conscious mind is steering us this way. We want to try to integrate them and reconcile them so that they're working in tandem and in support of one another. Then we won't be so frustrated when things don't work out the way we want to, and overall we'll experience a better quality of life. In short, if there's anything to get from this lecture, it's basically this. As humans, we are all deeply complex beings whose lives revolve around the use and the creation of symbols, which impact how we see and interact with the world greatly. The contents of our own minds are influenced not only by our own experiences that we've had in life, but also by the experiences of our ancestors, how they understood the world, how they saw it, and the kinds of stories that they told about the world in order to understand it. According to Jung, in order to lead fulfilling lives, what we need to do is we need to strive to understand not only our own personal lives, but the cultural history of humans in general. In order to communicate with each other effectively, in order to treat each other ethically, what we need to do is we need to start here with ourselves. We need to try to understand ourselves to the best of our own ability before we start meddling in other people's affairs. And we need to have a good understanding of what human history is generally and what our ancestral cultures were like in order to understand exactly why we see the images and themes that we do, why our mind expresses certain symbols to us, and how those symbols actually influence how we perceive and interact with the world. So, in preparing for ethics, I think it's a good idea that we all kind of take like a good hard look at ourselves and really try to understand the things that we want out of life, where we come from, the kinds of lives that our ancestors lived, and again, trying to reconcile our unconscious mind with our conscious mind. I think that's a pretty good summary of what Jung is saying in the first half of this essay. If you have any questions or concerns, feel free to email me. I would definitely recommend that if you want to understand more about what Jung is doing in these first two readings, go ahead and check out the optional lecture that I've uploaded titled Jung on the Unconscious Mind. I kind of elaborate on some of the concepts that I've talked about here, and looking at that optional lecture video might give you a deeper understanding of what I think Jung is trying to get at here. So, in any case, I'm going to stop the video here. I will see you on Wednesday with another lecture video covering the second half of Jung's essay, Approaching the Unconscious. Okay, have a great day. Bye.